What are you doing? My brother Tyler froze with three of his shirts hanging from one hand. He was standing inside my bedroom in front of my closet unpacking. Mom said you knew, he said. I knew what? Before he could answer, my mother stepped out of my kitchen holding the spare key I'd given her 2 years earlier for emergencies. Jesse, don't start, she said. I stared past her. Tyler's television was against my living room wall. 2 suitcases sat beside my couch. His shoes were lined up by my kitchen. 3 days earlier, I'd lost the property management job I'd spent 9 years building. Now my family had apparently decided I'd lost my apartment, too. Why is his stuff in my home? Mom sighed. His landlord isn't renewing his lease. Melissa is pregnant. They need somewhere stable. And her expression hardened. Your brother needs the apartment more than you do right now. I almost laughed. Instead, I looked at the spare key in her hand. I'd just returned from a job interview. Before reaching my door, I'd noticed flattened moving boxes in the hallway, but my key had worked normally. I hadn't imagined those boxes belonged to my brother. Then Dad arrived. He didn't ask what happened. He walked in like he'd been invited. Jesse, be reasonable. Where exactly am I supposed to live? You're unemployed, Dad said. You can stay with a friend until you're back on your feet. I stared at him. I have friends, so Tyler gets my apartment? You have savings, no kids, options. Tyler has a family coming. A few months, Mom added. That's all. I walked toward my bedroom. 3 boxes sat against the wall. Mine. Inside them were clothes, framed photographs, and folders from my desk. They hadn't simply moved Tyler in. They'd already started moving me out. I turned back. Who gave any of you the authority to decide who lives here? Dad actually laughed. Jesse, you rent this place. Stop acting like it's your property. For a second, nobody spoke. They thought I was just another tenant in Unit 4B. They had no idea I owned all 18 apartments in the building. I looked at Dad. Before I leave, answer one question. His smile faded. If Tyler deserves my apartment because I'm unemployed, are you taking responsibility for his housing from now on? Dad frowned. What kind of question is that? I didn't move. I asked if you're taking responsibility. And then I waited for the answer that would decide who actually had to leave. Yes, Dad said. Whatever it takes, he's not leaving. I held his gaze for a second, then I nodded. Okay. Mom looked at me sharply. Okay. Dad seemed just as confused. He'd been expecting an argument, probably tears. Maybe me calling a friend and dragging a suitcase out while everyone congratulated themselves for doing what was best for the family. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I photographed Tyler's television, the suitcases, the boxes containing my clothes, the stack of folders they'd moved from my desk. Then I pointed the camera at the spare key in Mom's hand. What are you doing? She asked. Making a record. A record of what? Of exactly how I found my apartment. Dad scoffed. Jesse, nobody's stealing anything. I looked at him. You entered my home without permission and started packing my belongings. Your mother has a key for emergencies. Mom folded her arms. This is an emergency. Tyler has nowhere to go. That was how it had always worked. Tyler was 29, but whenever something went wrong in his life, it became a family emergency. When he fell behind on rent 2 years earlier, Mom and Dad covered 3 months. When he quit a warehouse job because he hated his supervisor, Dad called it figuring out his future. When he needed money for a car repair, I was asked to help because I was doing well. Nobody ever asked whether Tyler could solve his own problem. They asked who else could solve it for him. I was different. Dad had been saying the same thing about me for years. Jesse's the one we don't have to worry about. It used to sound like praise. Eventually, I understood what it meant. If I was stable, I needed less. If I had savings, I could give more. If I handled my own problems, everyone else was allowed to create new ones for me. What none of them knew was that 18 months earlier, I'd made the biggest financial decision of my life. Years of saving, smaller investments, and equity I'd built over time had allowed me to purchase this entire 18-unit property through JC Residential Holdings LLC with commercial financing covering the balance. I hadn't told my family. Northline Property Management handled the building's daily operations. My own unit was documented through the same bookkeeping structure as the others. So, from the outside, I looked like a normal resident dealing with a normal management company. That was intentional. Every accomplishment I'd ever shared with my family seemed to become one of two things: something they minimized or something Tyler could benefit from. So, I stopped sharing. Tyler shoved another shirt into my closet. Are you seriously taking pictures instead of helping me? I lowered my phone. Stop unpacking. He stared at me. Mom and Dad already said I could stay. Did I? He didn't answer. Tyler, did I tell you that you could move into my apartment? He looked toward Mom. That isn't the point. It is exactly the point. Mom stepped between us. Melissa is pregnant, Jesse. I know. She needs stability. I know. Then why are you making this so difficult? I pointed toward the boxes containing my things. Because needing somewhere to live doesn't mean you get to take somebody else's home. Dad's jaw tightened. Stop making this ugly. I didn't make it ugly. You're turning your brother's crisis into some legal argument. No, you turned his crisis into my eviction. Dad shook his head. You're being dramatic. I walked over to Mom and held out my hand. The key. Her fingers closed around it. Jesse, the emergency key. Give it back. She looked at Dad. He gave a small nod, like he was granting permission. That irritated me more than anything. Mom placed the key in my palm. I slipped it into my bag. Then I looked at Tyler. Do not move anything else. He laughed under his breath. So what? You're calling the landlord. I picked up my purse. No. Dad relaxed. He thought I'd finally surrendered. Good. Go stay somewhere tonight. Tomorrow you'll feel differently. I opened the door. I'm leaving temporarily. Mom nodded as if we'd reached an agreement. I looked back at all three of them. I am not surrendering this apartment. Then I walked out. I didn't call a friend. I didn't drive to a hotel. I took the elevator downstairs, stepped into the lobby, and called Elena Ruiz at Northline Property Management. She answered on the second ring. Jesse, I need you to document an unauthorized occupancy issue in Unit 4B. Her voice changed immediately. What happened? My family used an emergency key to move my brother into the unit without my permission. There was a pause. Is he still inside? Yes. Did you authorize him at any point? No. Send me photographs. I forwarded every image I'd taken. The boxes, the furniture, my displaced belongings, the key. 3 dots appeared on my screen. Then Elena called again. I've got them. I looked up toward the 4th floor. Good. What do you want me to do? I answered without hesitating. Deactivate every access permission connected to my family, effective now. The next morning, Elena was waiting for me in the lobby. Tyler's still upstairs, she said. I figured. But when the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, I realized Tyler staying wasn't the only thing that had changed. Mrs. Patterson from 4A was standing outside her door. She gave me an awkward smile. Jesse, I heard you're moving. I stopped. What? Your mother said you're being temporarily relocated. She said your brother is taking over the apartment. Elena looked at me. I felt my jaw tighten. This wasn't private anymore. Mom had started telling my neighbors that my home had already changed hands. I'm not moving, I said. Mrs. Patterson blinked. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood. You didn't. Dad's voice came from behind us. He stepped out of my apartment with Mom and Tyler. You just haven't accepted it yet. 2 more doors opened farther down the hallway. Dad noticed. It didn't stop him. Your brother has a child coming, he said. You have no job. Sometimes family comes before pride. I could feel people listening. I wasn't going to stand in my own hallway and explain my bank account to an audience. This isn't about pride. Elena stepped forward. Tyler, I need to ask you a few questions. Dad frowned. Who are you? Elena Ruiz. Northline Property Management. Tyler shifted against the doorway. What questions? Do you have a lease for Unit 4B? No. An approved sublease? No. An occupancy agreement? No. Any written authorization from management allowing you to take possession? Tyler looked at Dad. Dad answered for him. My daughter gave him permission. No, I didn't. The hallway went quiet. Dad turned toward me. Jesse. Shoo. You don't get to say I agreed because it makes your story easier. Elena made a note on the tablet in her hand. Dad's face reddened. This is a family arrangement. Family members cannot transfer someone else's occupancy rights, Elena said. If Jesse didn't authorize Tyler to occupy Unit 4B, you cannot install him here yourselves. Mom stepped forward. Nobody is installing anybody. My son needs somewhere to live. That doesn't change the documentation. Mom looked at me. Fine. If you're doing so well, why don't you rent another apartment in this building? I almost smiled. Why doesn't Tyler? That stopped her. I turned toward my brother. If another unit becomes available, submit an application like anyone else. Tyler looked down. It probably wouldn't get approved. Why? He rubbed the back of his neck. My income isn't consistent right now. And the rental history? He didn't answer. Dad jumped in. That's irrelevant. No, I said. That's exactly why you chose my apartment. Mom's eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means Tyler had a housing problem, and instead of helping him solve it properly, you decided taking something from me would be easier. Dad pointed at me. There you go again. Rules, paperwork, applications. Your own brother needs help, and all you care about is procedure. Elena cut in. Actually, procedure matters here. She turned to me. I need your answer on record. Did you authorize Tyler Carter to move into Unit 4B? No. She tapped the screen. Documented. Dad stared at her, then at me. Something finally bothered him. Why are you asking her? Elena paused. Why does everything depend on what Jesse says? Dad continued. She's the tenant. Elena glanced toward me. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. This is still a family matter, I said. Then I looked at Tyler. You have until this evening to remove everything you brought into my apartment. Dad actually laughed. No. I turned to him. No, Tyler isn't moving anywhere. Mrs. Patterson quietly disappeared into her apartment and closed the door. Dad lowered his voice, but the anger remained. You lost your job 3 days ago. You should be thinking about how you're going to support yourself instead of threatening your brother. I held his gaze. Whatever it takes. He frowned. What? That's what you said last night. You said you were taking responsibility for Tyler's housing, whatever it takes. Dad waved his hand dismissively. I was talking about making sure he has somewhere to live. Exactly. You're twisting my words. No, I'm remembering them. He still thought I had nowhere to go. Still thought that if he refused long enough, I'd eventually surrender. Elena waited until Dad walked back toward my apartment. Then she stepped closer to me and lowered her voice. Jesse. I looked at her. Do you want me to handle this as your property manager, or are you ready to tell them who owns the building? Not yet, I told Elena. She studied me for a second. You're sure? I want Tyler to have one last chance to take his things out voluntarily. Elena nodded. Then I'll document the deadline. Dad saw us talking from inside my apartment. Whatever he thought our conversation meant, he apparently decided it meant I was backing down. By early afternoon, Elena forwarded me an email. The subject line read, Formal Occupancy Complaint, Unit 4B. I opened it. Dad had contacted Northline himself. According to Robert Carter, I'd agreed to let my brother move into my apartment and was now trying to throw out an expecting couple because of a family disagreement. I read the sentence twice. Then I looked at Elena. He actually put this in writing? He did. That changed things. Yesterday, Dad could have claimed tempers were high and everyone misunderstood one another. Now he'd formally told the management company something that wasn't true. Elena forwarded the complaint to me because it concerned unauthorized occupancy in the owner's own unit. I saved a copy. When I went upstairs again, Tyler was alone in the living room. Some of his clothes had been repacked, not all of them. He looked at me differently this time. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why does Elena keep asking you what to do? I put my bag on the counter. What do you mean? Yesterday she called you. Today she kept looking at you before she answered Dad. I said nothing. Tyler frowned. Do you work for Northline? No. Then what is going on? I looked around the apartment. Did you ever wonder why I chose this building? What? Think about it. He stared at me. I could almost see him sorting through things he'd ignored before. You knew about that plumbing shutdown before the notices went up. He nodded slowly. I waited. And that contractor downstairs knew your name. I still said nothing. Elena called you when the pipes burst last winter. She did. His eyes narrowed. And when rents went up everywhere around here, you didn't care. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Dad walked in carrying several sheets of paper. Mom followed him. I spoke to management, Dad announced. He held up the complaint as though it were a court order. They have everything in writing now. Elena appeared in the doorway behind them. Yes, she said. We do. Dad turned. Good. Then you understand Jessie agreed to this and changed her mind. No, Elena said. Your complaint says that. Our documentation says otherwise. Dad's confidence slipped. Then I want to speak to whoever can overrule you. No one is going to manufacture an occupancy agreement that doesn't exist. I want the owner. Tyler looked at me. I could feel his attention moving between Elena and me. Dad continued. Get the owner down here. I'll explain the situation myself. I stepped toward him. Dad, I'm giving you one last opportunity. For what? Apologize, have Tyler remove his belongings, return every copy of the key. We end this privately. He stared at me like I'd made a joke. You're giving me an opportunity? Yes. Mom touched his arm. Robert. He pulled away. No, I'm tired of this. Then he looked at Elena. Tell the owner exactly what's happening. My daughter is unemployed. She's single. She has no children. My son has a baby coming. Any reasonable person can see who needs a 2-bedroom apartment more. There it was. Not confusion. Not desperation. He genuinely believed he had the right to measure our lives and decide which one deserved a home. I looked at Elena. Bring the ownership file. Mom's head snapped toward me. The what? Elena didn't hesitate. All right. She left. Tyler stood up. What ownership file? Dad scoffed. Probably the landlord's paperwork. Tyler kept looking at me. What does the landlord's paperwork have to do with you? I didn't answer. For the first time since I'd walked into my apartment and found his clothes in my closet, Tyler looked nervous. A few minutes later, Elena returned carrying a slim property file. Dad immediately reached for it. Finally, Elena pulled it away before he could touch it. Mr. Carter, those documents aren't for you. Dad frowned. Elena walked past him. Then she placed the file directly in front of me. They're for the owner. Dad stared at the file in front of me. Then he looked at Elena. What do you mean they're for the owner? He gave a short laugh. Jessie represents the owner now. No, I said. I opened the file. The first document showed the recorded transfer of the property 18 months earlier. Dad leaned closer. His eyes moved across the page until they reached the buyer's name, JC Residential Holdings LLC. That isn't your name. No, it's my company. I turned to the next document. This one established exactly who controlled JC Residential Holdings. I slid it across the table. Dad read it. Mom stepped closer. Tyler didn't move. I watched Dad's expression change as he went back to the first page and then the second, apparently hoping he'd misunderstood something. He hadn't. I own the building. Nobody said anything. Mom stared at me. Tyler slowly sat down on the couch. Dad finally shook his head. No. I almost smiled. No, this can't be right. Elena remained beside me. It is. Dad pointed toward the paperwork. You pay rent. My unit is accounted for through the property's books. That doesn't make sense. It does when you own rental property through a company. I kept my voice level. JC Residential Holdings bought this building 18 months ago. Northline manages it professionally. I keep ownership separate from day-to-day operations, including my own unit. Dad looked toward Elena. You work for her? Northline manages the property on behalf of the ownership entity, Elena said. Mom sat down beside Tyler. You own all of it? All 18 units. Her mouth opened slightly. Then she looked toward the window as though the view outside might somehow prove I was lying. Dad tapped the documents. With what money? Years of savings, smaller investments. Equity I'd built over time. Commercial financing covered the balance. And you never told us? No. His face hardened. Why? That question was almost unbelievable after everything that had happened. Because every time I had something, you decided Tyler needed it more. Tyler looked down. Dad pushed the file away. So, losing your job cost me my salary. I finished the sentence for him. It didn't cost me this building. It didn't erase the rental income. It didn't make me homeless. I lost one source of income and a career I cared about. Mom stared at me. You let us think you were struggling. I was struggling. She looked confused. I just lost the job I'd spent 9 years building. Then why didn't you tell us you had this? Because those are two different things. I looked directly at her. I can own property and still be upset that I lost my job. Mom folded her arms. You knew we thought you were in financial trouble. No. You assumed I was. Dad started to speak. I stopped him. And even if I had been, what did you do? Silence. Did either of you ask whether I needed help? Neither answered. Did you ask whether I could cover my bills? Nothing. Did you ask whether I was okay? Mom looked away. Number 3 days after I lost my job, you used an emergency key to enter my home, packed my belongings, moved Tyler in, and told me to stay with a friend. Tyler looked toward the boxes stacked against my bedroom wall. His shoulders dropped. I should have asked you myself. I turned to him. Yes. He nodded slowly. I thought Mom had talked to you. She hadn't. I know that now. I didn't tell him it was fine. It wasn't. But for the first time since this started, Tyler wasn't hiding behind our parents. Dad was. I was trying to protect my grandchild, he said. I looked at him. From what? Instability. Tyler and Melissa need somewhere dependable. And why did protecting Tyler require hurting me? His jaw moved. No answer came. You had other options, I continued. You could have let them stay with you. You could have helped them find another apartment. You could have co-signed. You could have helped with a deposit. Dad looked irritated. That isn't the point. It is now. I leaned back. Yesterday, before I left, I asked whether you were taking responsibility for Tyler's housing. Dad's expression changed. He remembered. I repeated his exact answer. Yes, whatever it takes. He's not leaving. Mom looked at him. Dad said nothing. You were willing to make that promise when you thought I would pay for it. I didn't mean. I know exactly what you meant. I pointed toward Tyler's boxes. You meant Tyler would have somewhere to live because I would give up my home. Dad looked toward Elena, but she wasn't rescuing him. Neither was Mom. So keep your promise, I said. With your own apartment, your own money, or your own house. Then I looked around Unit 4B. But not mine. Tyler stood. I'll move my stuff. Dad turned sharply. Tyler. No, Dad. It was the first time I'd heard my brother openly refuse him during the entire confrontation. She didn't agree to this. Tyler picked up one of the suitcases. I should never have started unpacking. Elena documented that Tyler was voluntarily ending the unauthorized occupancy. There was no dramatic eviction. There didn't need to be one. Tyler had never become the lawful replacement resident of Unit 4B in the first place. By that evening, his television was gone. His clothes were out of my closet. His shoes disappeared from beside my kitchen, and the boxes containing my belongings were opened again. Dad kept his promise, though not in the way he'd expected. Over the next several days, he helped Tyler search for another apartment. Tyler's inconsistent income and rental history made the process harder than Dad had imagined. Eventually, Dad co-signed for a smaller place and contributed toward the deposits so Tyler and Melissa could move in. For once, the responsibility Dad had casually assigned to me came out of his own pocket. I dealt with the key immediately. A locksmith changed the lock on Unit 4B. Mom did not receive another emergency copy. I also gave Northline written instructions that Mom, Dad, and Tyler had no authority to access my apartment or make decisions concerning any unit in the building. Mom didn't take that well. You don't trust us anymore. She asked me that like the answer should have been difficult. You used an emergency key to move someone into my home. We were trying to help your brother. And that's why you don't have the key anymore. There wasn't much she could say to that. The story eventually reached some relatives. Dad's version traveled first. According to him, I'd thrown my pregnant brother and his girlfriend out after losing my job and becoming obsessed with property rules. I didn't call everyone to defend myself. But when relatives asked directly, I answered directly. Tyler never lived here. Mom used my emergency key without permission. They moved his belongings into my apartment and packed mine because they decided I should leave. Most conversations became very short after that. One aunt asked Dad why he hadn't simply offered Tyler his own spare bedroom. A cousin asked why anyone thought unemployment gave parents the right to reassign their adult daughter's home. After that, Mom and Dad stopped telling the story. The building itself changed less than people might imagine. I didn't raise rents to prove a point. I didn't punish tenants because they'd overheard the confrontation. Mrs. Patterson still waved when we passed in the hallway. Northline kept managing the property. Repairs were made. Bills were paid. People went on living their lives. The biggest change was me. For years, I'd accepted one family rule without ever agreeing to it. Because I was responsible, I was expected to sacrifice. Because Tyler struggled, he was expected to receive. Because Dad called me the one we don't have to worry about, everyone assumed that meant they didn't have to consider what anything cost me. That ended in Unit 4B. Tyler and Melissa moved into their smaller apartment before the baby arrived. A few weeks later, Tyler sent me a message. I was wrong. I should have called you before I brought a single box over. I'm sorry. There was no request for money underneath it. No favor. No explanation about why he couldn't handle something. Just an apology. I accepted it. That didn't mean everything went back to normal. I didn't want the old normal back. My relationship with Mom and Dad became more distant. Dad especially struggled with the fact that he could no longer end an argument by simply deciding what was best for everyone. Sometimes he'd go quiet when I disagreed with him. Sometimes he'd say, "You've changed." Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd finally stopped confusing his disappointment with authority. I kept interviewing for work. Owning the building didn't erase the fact that I loved my career. Property management had been part of my life for 9 years, and losing that job still hurt. But I also became more involved in the building I'd spent so long keeping separate from my family. I stopped treating my success like something that needed to remain invisible just to keep other people from claiming pieces of it. One evening, a few weeks after everything happened, I came home and stood in my bedroom doorway. Tyler's boxes were gone. My clothes were hanging in my closet again. My photographs were back where they belonged. My work folders were stacked neatly on my desk. The apartment looked ordinary. That was what made it feel so good. Nobody was deciding whether I deserved the space. Nobody was telling me someone else's needs automatically mattered more. I walked into the kitchen and placed my new key on the counter. 3 days after losing my job, my parents had walked into my home believing I'd lost the one thing that gave me power. A paycheck. They were wrong. And in trying to take advantage of the moment when they thought I had the least, they showed me exactly what I needed to stop giving them. Control over my own life. I picked up the key and looked around the apartment one last time. Losing my job never cost me my home, but it finally cost my family the right to decide what belonged to me.